Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of Keeping an Eye on the Geopolitical Ball with myself, Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow at Friends of Europe, speaking from Brussels. The great Napoleon used to say that it was forgivable to lose a battle, but it was not forgivable to allow yourself to be taken by surprise. And there are two types of crises. There are the ones that generally do come out of nowhere and could not be predicted. But there are the crises which are really on a slow burning fuse and which take place over several decades. So much so that first, we don't really take them seriously. And secondly, we have the illusion of believing that we have lots and lots of years ahead to grasp the nettle and to deal with them. And climate change is definitely in the second category. I read my first book on climate change called The Fate of the Earth by Jonathan Shea way back when I was at university in the early 1980s. And since then, we've had 25 COPs or UN-sponsored big conventions on climate change, hundreds and thousands of different initiatives, declarations, and meetings. But during this period where we've been taking climate change more seriously, paradoxically, we've been adding to climate change. For example, over 50% of all of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere today were put there since the 1990s. So there's been a disconnect between our intellectual revolution of waking up to the fact that this is a serious challenge, even a threat, and our willingness in terms of our economies, our industries, our societies to do anything serious about it. But this year in 2020, the Earth seems to be sending us a message that it's had enough of the human impact on the climate and it's reaching a geopolitical tipping point. You've seen all of this on the TV, of course, the big bushfires in Australia, the record temperatures in Siberia, and the melting of the permafrost, the forest fires in California, more burning in the Amazon. Only this morning we heard that for the Arctic, this has been the second warmest year on record, and the ice pack has now for the first time shrunk to under 4 million square kilometers. This means that, number one, much of climate change is beginning to be irreversible and will reshape our planet definitively. Number two, the longer we postpone action, the fewer the options are, and the more expensive and the more difficult they are going to become. Now, the manifestations of this challenge are pretty clear. I've mentioned already the extreme weather events like hurricanes, floods, storms, fires, more devastating, more frequent. But we also have longer term trends such as food insecurity as we lose 10 times more soil than we're able to generate. Water scarcity, about 60% of fresh water could well disappear from the planet up to the middle of the century. We have rising sea levels, which is not good news for the 50% of the population in Asia, for instance, that lives in coastal cities. We have the loss of biodiversity. Over 1 billion creatures were wiped out in the Australian bushfires and the implications for agriculture. And we have ecological refugees fleeing conflicts, but also parts of the world where it's simply not possible to live any longer. And the UN calculates that we could have, over the next 3 decades, 1.3 billion of these ecological refugees, which would make the current migration crisis seem very modest by comparison. The other thing is the generalization of the issue. The Institute for Economics and Peace has calculated that no fewer than 141 countries in the world, the vast majority, have at least one ecological challenge, and only 9 on this planet have no ecological challenge whatsoever. So we recognize that climate change is connecting different things in a negative way. It's a force multiplier of problems, and that it has feedback loops where first order effects lead to second order effects and to third order effects. So what can the security policy community do to start responding? Well, number one is take the issue seriously. And with meetings at NATO last week and the European Defence Agency this week, there's more sign that that community, the military community, notwithstanding its focus on China or Russia or peer-to-peer conflict, is now onto this. The first thing is that the military can be a lobbyist for action to reduce carbon emissions, because the better we can do there, the more likely the military will have to face the bad consequences. It can use its considerable intelligence assets to do better mapping, connecting the dots. and crossing the T's in a way that would allow us to be better able to predict the impact of climate change on security. It can make sure it has the capabilities in its arsenal, like helicopters, flat-bottom boats for humanitarian relief supplies, particularly in dealing with human security issues. It can also make sure that its own equipment and infrastructure, like military bases, are resistant to climate change so that they can operate. The military can also partner with vulnerable countries around the world, particularly in Africa and the Middle East, with its engineering units to help them build more resilience. And finally, the military can also be involved with the diplomats in solving conflicts, because climate change doesn't all cause all conflicts, but conflicts certainly make the impact of climate change worse, as we've seen in places like Syria recently, or in Afghanistan. And the more we can solve conflicts, the more we create a space of peace in which it is easier to address long-term climate change issues. So there's a big agenda out there where the military have a vital role to play, both as lobbyists and as part of the solution. The challenge is will they grasp that nettle, not in the years ahead, we don't have time for that, but in the days and months to come. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to joining with you this time next week. Bye for now.